In this particular video, we're going to talk about the Code of Conduct. And really, the Code of Conduct is just a series of ethical values that we should be maintaining. And we actually follow the Code of Conduct as it is presented by the Internal Revenue Service in their volunteer income tax assistant clinics. The agenda for this video will be to discuss these main topics: quality control at the site, which is very important. Secondly, we will be covering our volunteer standards of conduct, and from there we will go on to our state issues, and then finally wrap up with our quality review and concluding the interview. There are several facets to quality control at a site. The very first and the most significant, I will say, is competence. The person preparing the return must have a competence level at the level where, you know what, it's okay. I can prepare this return. I am comfortable with this. I have enough tax information and knowledge that I know I can prepare this return. If you look at a return and you start to feel, well, I don't think that this return is something that I can tackle, then I would like for you to stop, take a moment, reach out to one of the coordinators and state that to them. I am not sure if I'm comfortable. You may continue to go on and prepare the return, but at least you want to make sure that any questions you might have are being answered so that you are confident in terms of what you are doing. Additionally, we're going to have a waiver that must be signed by every single taxpayer that comes in. We cannot even start preparing a return until the taxpayer has signed the waiver. And the waiver is really going to state that this is a tax-free clinic, that their return is being prepared by volunteers, and that the return is being prepared based on the information that they have provided. Any information that they have omitted is not the responsibility of the tax preparer. That falls upon them. And every single taxpayer must sign this. We must maintain it as part of their file. When they leave, we will maintain a copy of this form, and we must make sure that we read it over with them to make sure that they understand what they are signing. Then we're going to move on to the intake or interview process. And in class, I introduced you to a form that has a series of questions. And those questions are really there to help you, to guarantee, as I stated in class, that you are going to be able to go through the process of preparing the return, and you know you're going to capture the information that you need because you have gone through this form and went through a series of questions that are going to make sure that you gather the documents that you need and the information that you need from the taxpayer. Now, confirming photo IDs and taxpayer identification numbers is very vital. As we mentioned in class, every taxpayer must have a valid ID, and every taxpayer must have a Social Security card with them, or they must have a taxpayer identification number as well. Now, our security, privacy, and confidentiality, that is very important. We never want to discuss information about our tax clients with anyone outside of the clinic. We want to make sure that we're protecting their information. We never want to walk away from the desk for some reason and leave a client's paperwork sitting there, their tax documents sitting there. We want to make sure that if you have to stand to go ask for something or do something, that the taxpayer has the paperwork in their hands, so now they have responsibility for it, and that if the taxpayer has left the desk for some reason, you want to make sure that you do not leave that information exposed, so you should stay in your position until the taxpayer returns, or you can have one of the course coordinators hold on to the documents for you. We're going to move on now to our Volunteer Standards Code of Conduct. And if you would have, you may have noted, I should say, when you signed up for your free tax help account, that this was something that was listed there. You had to check a box and you had to accept. We are not supposed to accept any type of payment. Remember, this is a tax-free clinic. We're doing this on a volunteer basis, and we are not accepting payment. Now, there will be taxpayers that are so appreciative, they might say, well, I would like to give you a tip, and maybe that's, $5 or $10. We're not allowed to accept any types of tips from a taxpayer. If a taxpayer were to offer you a tip or some form of payment, of any form, it could be other things other than cash, you should state to the taxpayers that you're very appreciative that they've made you this offer, but that you you are not allowed to accept any tips or any gifts, and just thank them for their appreciation. We're also not going to solicit any type of donations from a taxpayer for anything. So we don't say to them, here, there's this particular cause, and maybe you want to make a contribution to this cause. I hold it very closely to my heart. That is something that also is not allowed. Additionally, we're not allowed to accept any refund payments of federal or state refunds on behalf of the taxpayer. Some taxpayers will come in, they do not have a bank account, and they want to be able to get their funds quickly, and they might say to you, well, would you be able to accept this into your bank account, and then when you get the funds, you can then let me know, and I can get the funds from you. That is not allowed, so we definitely would want to notify the taxpayer that that is not something that you can do, and it would actually violate the code of conduct. And when I say violating the code of conduct, I want you to understand that a violation equals a dismissal from the tax center. So please take this very seriously. For number 2 here, we have listed is not solicit any business from the taxpayer you assist or use the knowledge you gained from that information about them for any direct or indirect personal benefit for you or any other specific individual. So as you're meeting with these clients, if you're someone that or know someone who has a business, you might see opportunities and say, oh, well, wow, this person has a small business, and I know someone, or maybe I have a small accounting practice on the side, and they really could use my services. You can't use this opportunity of having a taxpayer in front of you and using their information to then turn around and try to solicit business for the taxpayer on your behalf or on the behalf of someone else. That also violates our standards of conduct. You must not knowingly prepare false returns. And the example that we discussed in class, I said to you, what if a tax preparer comes to you and says, hey, I saw the armored truck, and the armored truck, the doors came open for some reason, a big bundle of money fell out of it, and I have it. Since nobody knows I got this, do I have to file this on my tax return? Well, you must say yes. And if the taxpayer says, well, you know what, I think I'm going to take my chances and I'm not going to include it because the IRS is not going to know, you're going to have to dismiss that taxpayer. We will not prepare a tax return for the taxpayer. And what you should say to them is, sir, I am sorry. Now that I am aware that you have this income, I cannot prepare a tax return for you without including it, because then I would be preparing a false return, and that would violate the standards of conduct. Number 4, not engage in any criminal, infamous, dishonest, notoriously disgraceful conduct or any other conduct deemed to have a negative effect on Suffolk University. We want to always make sure that we're presenting a very professional presentation to people out there. And remember that we represent the university as students, as faculty, and even as alumni someday when we move on. We represent the university, and we should do that with pride. We should do that with honor. And we want to make sure that if we come across any issues, and maybe someone in the class that you know has done something that may tarnish our reputation, then maybe that is something you want to speak to them about. And maybe that person should decide on their own to withdraw from the program. Okay, number 5, treat all taxpayers in a professional, courteous, and respectful manner. And what I'm going to say about this, and it seems self-explanatory, but there is one thing I will note, and please keep this in mind. When we are dealing with taxpayers, there will be many taxpayers that will come in, and they will have difficulty with language. And sometimes because we get frustrated, we're in the midst of all of this work we have to do, we're very busy, our frustration may come across to them as if we are being disrespectful in some way, and we don't want to do that. We want to always be courteous. So please take a step back, take a breath if you're frustrated because you're not able to communicate with someone due to a language barrier, and just give them the opportunity to, work with you slowly and get through the process. You will get the return done. It will just take a little bit longer. Well, the topic of due diligence. Well, doing your part includes what? we're going to confirm a taxpayer and their spouse's identity. And remember, we're going to do that via, let's say, their driver's license number, or we're going to use a state ID number if they do not have a driver's license, or in the case of a foreign student, obviously we're going to use their passport in order to identify them. And this is very important in this day and age because of identity theft and the amount of fraud that goes through tax returns with the IRS literally is in the millions. So we want to make sure that we check every single taxpayer. It is a requirement. If the taxpayer does not have identification, they cannot have their tax return prepared. They must reschedule and come back at another date when they do have that information available. Providing top quality service by helping taxpayers understand and meet their tax responsibilities. As I mentioned in class, with every single taxpayer, we should be performing a review of the tax return with them and making sure that they understand that what is going on with their tax return, making sure that they understand, well, did they get a refund, or if they owe, more importantly, because a lot of times taxpayers, when they owe, will turn around and just disregard. You want to make sure that you explain to them that if they owe, they need to make the payment, that the payment needs to be made by the deadline of the tax return, which in this year is April 17th, and that it is very important that they make the payment so that they do not receive additional penalties and interest charges. Making sure the facts represented by the taxpayer paint a reasonable picture. And this is just really about thinking about what the taxpayer is telling you. Does it really make sense? If you raise a question with the taxpayer, as I mentioned in class, let's say about health insurance coverage, and the taxpayer starts to go around in many circles talking about how they had insurance and then they didn't, but they think they do, and etc., and around they go, it should raise a question as to whether this taxpayer really had insurance. And in that case, you may want to say to the taxpayer, well, we want to make sure that you have insurance because there is a mandate, so we do need to confirm that you have insurance. But as I mentioned in class, we're not here to investigate. If the taxpayer had a job and the taxpayer states to you, yes, I had insurance, and they're confident about their answer, is okay for you to move forward. Now, in cases of income, you may see taxpayers in a scenario that we referenced where they had income that isn't reported to them on a form, but they should be reporting. If they turn around and they say to you, well, I have this income, but I don't think I have to report it because it wasn't a form, then those types of things, you want to make sure that you're talking things through with the taxpayer. And if the taxpayer goes back and says to you in that case, well, you know what, I'm wrong. I was really wrong. That wasn't this year. That must have been another year. Then you have to start worrying about, is a taxpayer being honest? And if we believe a taxpayer is not being honest with us, we will not prepare a tax return for that taxpayer, because we could potentially be preparing a fraudulent return, and we want to make that clear to the taxpayer. Let's look at another example where we might want to question what is going on in a scenario as we perform our due diligence. Larry comes to our site to have his taxes prepared. Larry tells the tax preparer his filing status is head of household. He wants to claim his 2-year-old nephew for the earned income credit. Remember, that is a subsidy given by the government to low-income individuals, and it is refundable. He has no child care expenses. He earned $19,000 in wages, and he is 26 years old. Well, as we're thinking about these facts, what sort of questions should come to our mind? Well, first of all, Larry says that this is his nephew. Where are the child's parents? Why is Larry the one claiming them? Why aren't the parents claiming the child? So these are the type of questions that should come up right away in a situation when it is not a parent who is claiming the child. Also, he says there are no child care expenses. So maybe you want to ask, well, who's taking care of the child while you're at work? Because that could be an indicator that this child really isn't someone for whom Larry is responsible. Is there anyone else in the household that contributes? That's another question. Is there someone else that's really helping to provide the support? Remember that when we're trying to claim someone, we must be providing over 50% of the support. So we need to confirm that. And this is important, especially when we're looking at the fact that Larry's wages are very low. And finally, and this is all really tied together, we need to think about, is there someone else who can claim this child? Larry's trying to claim the child, but is there someone else? And predominantly, in most cases, that will be the child's parents. The golden rule for our tax clinic just will be the same as any golden rule that any tax preparer should have in any firm, anywhere. We want to always maintain the taxpayer's trust. The taxpayer will have to trust that all the information we receive from them is going to be protected from disclosure. We do not disclose any personal tax information gained as a result of the service provided. Do not openly discuss the taxpayers by name in the presence of other volunteers or taxpayers. Do not retain the taxpayer's document for a follow-up visit. If the taxpayer comes in and the taxpayer is missing some documents in order to prepare their return, then you must make sure that they take all of their documents with them and that they come back again in their revisit to have their return prepared. Never accept holding on to documents for a taxpayer. A taxpayer will then later say, well, I had this and I had that, and they really may believe it that they left it with you when they did not. So in order to prevent that, we always require that they take their documents with them. Do not take taxpayers' information for preparation of the return outside of the presence of the taxpayer. So in this particular case, we're going to make sure that we're sitting down with our taxpayer. The taxpayer is there with us as we go through the forms, always in front of us, always as we work through the tax return. Do not prepare a tax return when you suspect an individual is not providing truthful information. And we discussed this. If something feels to you like it's wrong, trust your gut. Maybe call a coordinator over, maybe call me, and let's talk about it a little bit, and let's get through this. We do not want to file a fraudulent return. It does not mean that we will never make a mistake and file one. Absolutely not. But we're going to do our very best to prevent it. Do not exclude any of the taxpayer's relevant income or expenses. If the taxpayer mentions to you, as we noted before, that he has income or even in the other case that they have expenses, then you want to make sure that you report all of that. Even if the taxpayer says to you, hey, I don't think I have to, you want to clarify with the taxpayer, yes, we must report this information. And if the taxpayer does not want to, all we can do at that point is return the documents to the taxpayer and inform them that we cannot prepare their tax return. Now let's move on to the very last component in our presentation today, the quality review and concluding the interview. Remember that every return must be quality reviewed. As a preparer, you're always the first person to review the return. When you're finished entering all of the information and you cleared all of the diagnostics on the return, you're going to print a PDF format of that tax return, and then you're going to look it over compared to the documents that you have, and you're going to ensure that the income is represented, that the deductions are represented in order to make sure that it is prepared accurately. Then you will raise your hand and a coordinator will come over and then we'll have a second review at that point of the tax return. And they will be looking for the same exact items that I just noted. So as you can see, there's a two-step process to every return, and the purpose of that is to make sure that we have prepared a return accurately.